Good morning to everybody. We are online. Then please smiles for the people. That's okay. Good morning to everybody to be here and to participate to this, I think, very important panel, very important meeting that is has the main argument is how to communicate the design in a different way. Okay, then the history, the system to convince the people, the system to present in the right way our ideas, our jobs, and so on. Then first of all, 1 minute for each to present yourself to the auditorium. And after we will start with the questions and arguments. Cinzia?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Very quick introduction of myself. I am a food designer, an industrial designer, a chemist, a brand designer, and a communication design. So I have knowledge in a different field of design and a past in different other fields as well. I'm a founder of Amo Food Design Studio. I'm based in UK, and I work around food innovation, product design, sustainability, food system, and I'm basically my focus is helping companies to envision a better food through design thinking.
Johanne?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Johanne Ib. I'm a communication and concept designer. I'm based in Denmark. I'm educated from Kolding Design School, Design Academy Eindhoven, and also was half a year in Iceland in Listhauskole. But that's years ago. Now I both make performances. I have my own studio, but I also teach a lot, both in food design, but also in how to create experiences, how to do design research, and so on. I would say my focus is on creating rituals, future scenarios, creating common threads between people. Yeah, and I'm really happy to be here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Super funny. Maud, à toi.
Yes, hi. So I'm Maud. I'm half British, half French. I'm a food designer and experience designer based in London. I am the founder of Salty Studio. So I've been running the studio for the last couple of years. And this has been I've been exploring sort of the intersection between food and culture and community, and sort of taking inspiration from a lot of my travels. So I love to go and explore different cultures around the world. I'm passionate about sort of food anthropology, sustainability, and innovative design. I've done that through my BA in sustainable product design and masters in food design. And yeah, very excited about sort of more upcoming trends and forward-thinking brands. And I've taught I've done a couple of guest lectures at universities on food design. And I'm also the host of Edible Words podcast. So do go and listen.
Thank you so much, Serdar. Serdar, take your time.
No problem at all. Thank you for the invitation and including me in this wonderful panel. My name is Serdar Paktin, and I'm a strategist, semiotician, and a sense maker. I work in between two platforms. One is that Pact agency. We work with companies and brands in cross-cultural strategy, discovering different cultural codes, sensory codes in their markets, and associating them with their products, services, or their brand. So we help them find the common ground between the cultural codes or sensory codes and their brand. On the other side, I'm co-founder of Temaset Sensory Design Studio based in Istanbul. And we work with brands to create multisensory experiences where we turn sensory experiences, food, smells, and turning into brand experiences or branded experiences. Thank you.
Okay. Julia?
Yeah, hello, thank you. I'm very glad to be here. I'm Julia. I'm from Berlin, living since 20 years in France now, in Paris, and now in Nantes for the French one. Nantes. And I have a career in product designer, and food designer, and strategic designer, and global brand designer. And now, since 4 years, I'm heading the Master of Food Design Lab, which is a master really concerning about food design, but in a very systemic approach and very process oriented. So and this is really, now it's my turn to push the students and make their way, and I try to really to make their place in the industry and make design make sense in food design, industry and food system.
Okay, then last but not least, my friend Jasper.
Thank you, Giorgio. So my name is Jasper Ulitkaat. I'm from the Netherlands. I run a studio. It's called Creative Chef Studio. And what I basically do with my team, we create experiences for the sake of art, but also for brands. And what we do, we combine storytelling, serving food, creating music pieces, and blending all that together so we can create a memory for the guests that are at my table. And we do that all over the world, and we're having lots of fun. And if we do our job good, then we create a memory for our guests that can get the world to the next level. So that's our goal always, creating a memory for people so that,
Perfect. Then we have all the possible and impossible competencies in the design for food. Why I underline design for food and not food design, in my opinion, because we are not engaged on the raw material, then food. We are engaged in all the world around the food. And this is my declination. It's not completely mine, but it's a declination that we made in a Master of Design for Food in Politecnico di Milan in collaboration with the Gastronomic University of Pollenzo. I'm teacher on this master, and we decided to declare that the design for food is all the world of food apart the raw material. I don't know if you agree, but it's a, let's say, a little a thin differentiation, but quite important. One of the problems that we designers have is to communicate our results. And to communicate, especially for our, let's say, teacher to the students, to explain better how you will be engaged in to present to the external and non-designer people your work, your job, and your idea, primary idea or final idea. Cinzia, you are an industrial designer at the end, then it's hard design, hard design, but how can design influence the perception of food in our thinking system?
Well, I think the perception of food is one of the most vast topic, to be honest. So it covers and embraces a very different area of food design as well. So that include packaging, of course, labeling, and product design per se. So it depends, of course, on what area we are talking about. Considering that food perception is basically ruled by all the senses, then when we design food, we can intervene on different area, of course, but the one that I think and I would like to talk about, I think, is pretty much about the sensorial side of it. So sensorial is most of the time a synesthetic experience. That means that it involves all the five senses and is involved when we perceive and when we have food and we see food and we interact with food. By synesthetic, I mean, of course, is a simultaneous kind of multisensory experience. So we are using basically all the senses, and we create a cognitive pathway that lead us to, involuntary experience or a secondary sensory for cognitive pathway as well. So it's basically a cognitive pathway that we will cross over between different senses. That's, for me, is the most, I would say, interesting part of the sensorial side of it, and the way they are using senses as well. So in my view, when you work with senses and you work around the perception of food as well, you have to work with synesthesia. That means that the way that you basically received information from food is changing all the time, depending on what your action are on the senses. Saying that, I would say that the final result that will make the food maybe less appealing, more interesting, sometimes boring or even disgusting sometimes. It depends on how we present the food and how we let people interact with food. And for interaction, I mean, of course, how we lead people to use their senses and to react with their senses with food as well. So saying this, basically, what we change with design then is not just about the food, but it's more about the experience. Because what we are changing is not per se the fact that we are changing the way they see the food, but it's the experience they have at the end. And changing the experience to the person, it's basically the best way for us to use the design as a tool. So design is the perfect tool for us to develop the experience based on our final goal. So it depends on what we want to achieve at the end of the experience. Design allows us also to create product that can have a different narrative and even disguise people sometimes. So it doesn't have to be the normal path. So that's the beauty of it. So we can play with the food as well, and we can play with the perception as well. We can do that by using different shape, different taste, different colors, and consistency as well. So they're all based around the 5 senses. Of course, the first interaction most of the time with food is our vision, but that it can be secondary. So it's not the only thing that we are using basically to interact with food and to follow a path that we want to develop with food design.
Okay.
If we change the experience and the outcome of the experience, we are changing the behavior of the persona towards the product. Let me just do an example, and then I will let you continue with the rest. So if I give you a piece of gorgonzola cheese, gorgonzola, of course, is a very well-known cheese. It has a mold in it. And if I will package the product as cheese, you will, of course, know how to use it, and you will be feeling safe to have the cheese. But if I put the cheese in a jar and I put fermented food on top as a label, that means that we're going to show the same thing, and it's actually true because cheese is a fermented food, but I'm sure you're not going to be very safe to consume the cheese because you don't even know what it is, because I've changed your path basically, and I've changed the way and the perception of your perception of the food. So if what we can say that basically the experience of the food is just a repeated outcome of the same experience. If we change the experience and if we change the outcome, then we can change the perception. And that's what food design especially can do.
Yeah, then aesthetic versus needs. Okay.
Yeah, most of the time, yeah, but it's not just about the aesthetic side.
No,
so you can play with
it's all it's all the communication in terms of packaging, aesthetic, colors, and so on, and especially right words. Johanna, following these sentences, how do you balance the aesthetic aspect or the global aspect of food design with the practical and functional needs? You know that the food is a need. Otherwise, we dare.
It actually follows along quite well with what we just heard. Like in my food design lab, the aesthetic, the sensorial and social aspects of the food experience are the most important elements. And that is for me, because that is the field I work with. That's the field where I'm asking my questions, making my research, and also taking my teaching from. more than the practical. And I think it's because I see food as a way for people to connect. We heard it before, like food is like social glue. So I focus a lot with what happens around the plate. And from that, I involve my participants in the design process. We are co-designing the elements to eat with, like we are creating new tools to eat with together. And like for this, I actually tried to create a tool or a concept that I call a recipe for eating together. And that's a design concept where I'm taking a lot of my performances, creating them from that tool, and it can be used both for the creation but also as a conversation tool for meaningful food experiences. It's pinpointing the importance of senses, presence, care, and time together when eating. And for this research, for the tool, I actually worked with different groups of people here in Denmark, both big groups of like older people, kids, and young students. And these people, they explained and demonstrated in the study of creating the tool that for a food experience to be perceived as meaningful, there must be elements of sensorial engagement, a feeling of presence or care or time. So maybe as you can hear, like meaningful is something I am trying to build my food design research around. Maybe as a last comment before I give the words to another one is that studies show, at least here in Denmark, that community is an essential part of what people feel is a fruitful food culture. But that culture is, at least here in Denmark, under pressure. More and more people are eating alone, and many feel lonely around the dinner table. So like, I think in my balance, or at least my focus, is on food as social glue, and that's the most important aspects more than the other ones in my lab. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Maud, I changed the question. Following the five senses of Johanna, do you have a project, or could you briefly describe the project where you consciously and harmoniously integrated all five senses?
Yeah, so actually it's an interesting topic, because it was something that I was trying to focus on when I started my studio, and mostly because I watched this really interesting TED talk by a designer called Jinsup Lee. So if everyone wants to look at it on YouTube, and he explained how by improving some of the senses, or improving the different senses that we have, you can really create more memorable experiences. But so that was really sort of a big source of inspiration for me, and that's sort of how I started, and I wanted to create more of my events around all these five senses. But firstly, it's actually quite important to keep a good balance between these five senses, because if you push all of them, it can easily become overpowering. So I think it's more just about looking at these different senses and seeing which ones you could sort of tweak a little bit more and elevate a bit more. And funny enough, on the other side as well, food itself is a five sense experience, as Cinzia was saying earlier. And that's why I was so focused on the material itself, rather than maybe making events all around the five senses. It's more that the food itself is also around it's a five sense experience. So obviously you have the taste, the smell, the touch side. I think the touch side is something I quite like to look at a bit more. The smell as well. And the sound as well. So when you're eating or when you're cooking, so it's sort of being a bit more mindful about these different the sensory experience you can get. So I can show sort of two examples of. There was this food meditation that I was running a couple of sessions previously, and I just thought that was such an interesting experience to really sort of focus on each different sense. And have a sort of mindful sensory meditation experience around food. just again to be a bit more thankful of where the food comes from, but also to sort of awaken all the different senses. So the link with that as well with the senses is that it can help a lot with anxiety and depression and those sort of more mental health issues as well. So one of the projects I did at the end of my university course was to combine those two, and it was a full sort of eating and a sensory experience to help with mental health. But actually also a workshop that I did was around edible face care. And so again, how you said about food design being around food, but not necessarily the food just itself, but and we were doing this online workshop where you would combine very simple, but sugar, coconut oil, and Earl Grey tea leaves, and sort of mixing all that together. And so you had the visual side, the colors, the smell. I remember the participants were saying it smells so nice and calming. And then you have the taste, because actually you can technically eat it as well. And then the touch, because then you use it to exfoliate on your face, on your body. And the sound element as well was more of the teaching element, but then also when you're actually using the product later as well, sort of the sound of water and calming and all of those. But yeah, so for me it's interesting because I often get asked about the events that I do and how do I incorporate all the senses in that. But actually food itself in the first place has already all those 5 senses, which is partly why I chose this as a material to work with.
Thank you so much. Serdar continues to speak with you are a sense maker. Okay, then sense maker is the right consequence of mode. Okay, but also, as mentioned Cinzia before, also the words are so important. Then 5 senses and description of the senses. And you are a semiotician. Okay. How do you apply the semiotic principle in food design to communicate meaning and values through food and its packaging?
Perfect. We've already spoken about this, in fact, because every person is a semiotician by birth, by being a human, because like we breathe, we also decode the signifiers we see, smell around. Everything we can sense is a part of semiotics, and every person is a semiotician by heart. The only thing that we do differently, we do apply some principles on it, and we are consciously analyzing the relationship between signs and symbols and how we perceive them. That's the only thing that differentiates a semiotician from a person. Otherwise, we all do this. So when we look into semiotics, as I said, everything we can sense is a subject to semiotics. Everything we can smell. And sometimes semiotics is only focusing on the language. And in the recent years, especially in the last 30, 40 years, semiotics is going into a state of multimodality, as they call it, and finding different domains where we can analyze meanings that are communicated through other things. And the way we apply our semiotic principles is that in 2 ways. On my brand consultancy, we look into different cultural spaces and try to figure out the sensory codes in there and how we can apply and associate them with the products. One example I could give, maybe to follow Maud's line of thought, the edible face care. When we were working on a skincare project in China, we've seen a lot of skincare products communicating their products as food for skin or food for your skin. So when we look into the concept of food, if you start from there, from the conception of it, we generally think of food as something to be eaten by our mouth. But it doesn't have to be so. Anything you can ingest into your body could be perceived as food as well. In that sense, a skincare product could turn into food, or at least the concept of food, and then become a food for skin, that you can nourish your skin, or you could get nutrition into your body through your skin. And in another concept, when we design elements, we look into how how we can apply semiotic framework to create a food product for an experience that we design. We generally discuss with the chef and explain them how we would like the audience to feel and take a message through that food. So we explain to the chef what we would like the person to feel and communicate, and then we discuss with how we can put that into texture, how we could communicate through the taste. For instance, if there's a fight that we would like to communicate, then we could easily use sweet and sour and chili, and then the taste is also fighting within themselves. And the more you apply extremities, the bigger the fight is. So this is just a small example to it. So I don't know if I've gone over time. I could just stop here and then continue maybe later on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Julia, following the discussion or the words of the semiotic words of Serdar, I'm interested to explain, and if exist, to put on the table the correlation between 5 sense words and packaging, and if there is a harmonious contribution to mix all the components, in your opinion.
Good question, and I will also connect with your introduction. So because I was really interested of what you said, why design, why the designer can't explain what they are doing actually, and why nobody is hearing them, that what you do in Polenta, so how we can communicate. So I'm really always in the meta level to check if we as designer, we are really care for what we are doing, and are we aware of all the power we have and all the influence then we have. And especially when you talk about 5 senses and consumer experiences, is so powerful, and you can change so many things by senses. Especially here we had a lot of example about experience with participants, or maybe one-to-one experience. But when this is going to industry, manipulation of senses can be getting very dangerous. Also, research and development in companies with sensuality really goes to a high level of a lot of money spent of making us feel something. When you take a certain yogurt, there's vanilla in, so it's tricking with our 5 senses. So this is going on another level where I think this, and also when we now have a lot of protein alternatives, we are introducing new food, and so we have to find new food languages for meat alternatives that are completely made up of transformed food. So I'm really alerting on this, that we have to be also maybe stop this development, or say also, let's keep it transparent and keep it authentic and honest, because you can do so much. You can also harm so much. And I think a good design and a good impact in 5 senses is if it tells you the truth and not makes you sense something what is not there. You can play with all what you say was imaginary and make reference, but we were so treated by marketing and industry the last years. I think the new way to be in transition and be go to the next step, and so what is our sustainable food of tomorrow? We have to come to back something very basic, and less is more. And so maybe it's a bit radical to do this, to say this here. But I think this is what I try to also what I try to say to my students, but also in industry and partners. I think there's a shift going on. There's a shift in industry, and So we have to also take place to take. So do you want to be in this research and development project within industry, or do we want to, how can we be impactful with design to make this change? And 5 senses is included, of course.
This is absolutely clear. And for example, one of the problems that I have with my students when they present a design, a product, and so on, is that there is static. Don't communicate in the right way. And now the master of the visual artistic communication is necessary. Then, Jasper, how do you integrate the visual storytelling with the overall sensory experience of a food product? My opinion is fundamental.
Yes, it is fundamental. It is. Well, what I basically do, so the main thing of my project is that I always cook a dish. So I have to address something with that dish. So it starts out with a good story. What is the story? Which is a meaningful story I want to tell my guests. Sometimes I connect it to the place I am or the company that hires me. I have to add some elements in that story, but it has to be like we just earlier said, it has to be a meaningful, good, authentic story. And then I tell that story, but it has to connect with the food. So the first thing the guest will see is the look of the food. It can be an ugly dish. It can be a beautiful dish. If it fits with the story, then you hit the mark, you hit the spot. But then the rest is going to work, because only the visual is I think the second stage. So you have story, then the visual you see, and then when you start eating or experiencing the food, you can add elements that can uplift and enhance the experience of the food itself. You can add crunchiness, you can add sound, you can add interactivity, like sometimes you can add letters or QR codes, or you can make it as crazy as you want. But that's the third stage. So you first start with the story, then you have the presentation, which suggests something. Then you have all these possibilities, and then you have the food itself when you eat. And hopefully, if you do your job really well, the visual, the story, and all the other information will connect with the food, with your brain. So you add the information you just received to the bites you are taking, I think if you do that really well, you have to plan everything, you have to time everything, then it will become a memory, because you have just deepened the story of you want to tell the guests while they're eating their food. And if you are able to do that, then it transcends the possibility a normal chef has, that normal they say, well, this is a beautiful truffle from this and that area. But if you tell it in a way that it's also a message, then it will become a deeper experience. And I think all those other things around the food, the visual, and the other senses can deepen that story you want to tell. So I think you have to focus on all of it, but you have to it's like a choreography of when are you trying everything. That's basically what I think.
Okay, thank you so much. The discussion is absolutely deeper, and it's wonderful because we put on the table all our know-how, and I hope that in the future we will make a project themselves. Second, we have short time as usual. Then I have another tour of sentences of questions, but please small, otherwise Antonio kill us and the project is almost finished. Cinzia, how do you take into account the consumer visual experience when designing a food product?
Sorry, I mute myself. Very, very shortly, what Serdar was saying before, and Julia as well, but also Jasper, to be honest. So, in a very nutshell, I would say that the experience that you do with the visual side of it is probably for now, the most important side of food design in terms of selling. So if you are a company and you're a brand, basically your visual side is the most important thing you have to think about when you present your product, because that is, as we were saying, is the storytelling behind your product, is also telling you the authenticity and what the product is about. So when you present your product, you have really to think about colors, integration, way to display your product in the shelf as well. Your competitors. So colors are really important. Shapes are really important. Semiotically, of course, when we are designing packaging and we change the shape of the packaging, we are definitely telling a storytelling as well. So we are saying that that product maybe is more soft, or is more strong, or is more hard. So we need to think about all the elements when we talk about visual, because we have usually like 10 seconds before a customer will change his mind or her mind, and they will go to some other product. So if you are a seller, if you are a company that wants to develop a new product and wanted to put something new on the market, you definitely have to think about visual.
Okay, and Joanne, starting to this fact and figures, my question is, how do texture and tactiles qualities of food influence your design choices?
Yeah,
and
okay.
how do you consider the sensation of the consumer will experience during the consumption?
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I'll try to also keep it short. In my food experiences, ritual senses are almost the core of what is going on. To maybe exaggerate it a little bit, I really believe that a boiled egg can be food design when placed in a setting, or a performative setting, or a ritual where you are invited to focus, think, or laugh, or something forth. In my lab, I kind of try to explore future scenarios through collaborative experiments and learning, and the core is really to create conversations and interactions with the participants. And I would maybe try to come up with an example, and I was thinking that it could be a project that I did some years ago called the Detail Chefs. It was a project we did in Lebanon. I did it mainly with a friend of mine called Manuel from Design Academy. And we collaborated with restaurants in Lebanon. And it was about exploring the feelings in food that the chef were putting in it, and that the participants were feeling when they were eating. And one example is that we created spoons made with magnifying glasses, and the performative setting created conversations both between the participants, but also between the participants and the chefs. And yeah, to keep it shortly, of course, a lot of the chefs, they told that they add love to their food. So we were actually eating love. And as a last comment, I'm currently working on a cookbook that I create with kids and young students in Denmark. And we are co-designing this cookbook, and I'm in an early stage with it. But when asking kids or young students to come up with important or memorable or meaningful recipes, they are often thinking about dishes that was cooked by people that they really love, or people that showed them care. And feelings, love, and food is just an endless inspiration for me, at least.
Absolutely. Yes. I remember when I was a toys designer in the US, and the mini food could were absolutely wonderful and fundamental. Mood, another important argument. Probably we will engage Antonio for a panel only for this argument, sustainability. It's let's say it's the arguments, the top arguments regarding all the packaging and food situation. In your opinion, how is sustainability influencing your approach in food, but in the communication of food? In a short time.
Yeah, so I think sustainability is definitely, it's been evolving over the last couple of years. And I quite like to sort of mention this, that when I first applied for my bachelor's in sustainable product design, it was actually called 3D design when I applied for it, and went for the interview, and they said, our course is going to be changed to sustainable product design. And it's a university in the southwest of England in Cornwall called Falmouth University. I remember going to the interview and thinking, actually, I'm not quite sure I want the sustainability label. For me, at that time, it seemed a bit too hippie. Like, it wasn't quite sure about it, because it really wasn't part of, and that was back in over 10 years ago, 2012, 2013. And it's just so amazing. I'm so grateful that they were so forward thinking in creating and changing the name of the course, because then through that course, I learned so much around it. And obviously now, sustainability is quite a big part of my life. I'm definitely not a pro at it, and I'm definitely not perfect at all, far from that. But I think it's just interesting. I'm more curious to see what can be done, particularly around food. So just in general as well, one thing that I remember really well from my course was a module on eco-design strategies. And it was all these different sort of levels of where you could sort of tweak this, the sustainable, the ecological impact during the production of a product. So you have the materials at the start, which I think now we're sort of working on a bit better. How do we source them? What kind of materials? Then you have the manufacturing side as well. So how that can be improved. You have then the product use as well. And I think that the other ones that I found quite interesting, the transport was quite good as well. So even brands like IKEA, for example, were quite forward thinking in the past, where with flat packing everything, so it just means you can transport more at the same time, so making them more efficient. And then towards the end, you have obviously the life cycle, what happens to it at the end. And then one element that I quite liked was emotional design, which was the attachment people have with a product. So for example, a watch that has been passed on from father to son, or in the family, or jewelry, or I quite like the fun topic, not around food, but cars, for example, classic cars that are kept for a long time and sort of maintained, instead of the newer cars that are just sort of after 6 years, you can't fix them anymore. So I think the emotional attachment was something I was really quite interested in food. So yeah, I think there's definitely around all those different sides. Talking about communication, I think it's making sure that a brand is transparent as well. I think as Julia was saying earlier, there's a lot of there is more and more greenwashing as well. I think brands are trying to bring the focus on something to hide something else that they're not doing, and they're not doing right. So I think there's definitely room for improvement on there. And then I mean, I can go on for ages on the sustainability side, but the link with food as well. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
Okay. Serdar, in the last keynote with Mod, we spoke with airplane food, flying food, etc. And in a plane, we could have more different people with more different multicultural experience and so on. Apart the sustainability that is worldwide sentence and worldwide argument, but how do you take into account different cultural sensitivities and sensory tradition related to food in your food design work to create a multi-sensory experience in a multicultural audience? For example, in Stupid Things, in the airplane?
This is a wonderful question, but it would require a great space to discuss this in detail. But in a nutshell, I could say two things very dumbly. One thing, you could look for a common ground for everyone. So going to the universal sensorial experiences or sensory codes of universal food culture, which wouldn't either offend or dissuade anyone from eating that food, keeping everything clean, as in, for any religious or nutrition sensitivities, so that keeping that into play is the key thing, because people will disregard food depending on their religion, depending on their nutrition preferences,
Exactly.
or their allergy. So that's number one thing. Number two, keeping to the universal sensory codes of food. Three, if that's a duality in there, if we know the number of cultural differences in there, so let's say it's a dual culture, so it's like two different cultures in one place, and then we could find a common ground between those two cultures and then build upon that. And the final thing would be to do something totally new, totally innovative, so that they don't have a prior experience or a prior sensory memory of it. Then in that airplane, you could build new memories, and then they could go out of that new airplane as a new group of people having shared the same sensory code together.
Okay, thank you. Julia, I switch to Jasper because I want to conclude the panel with you with the strategic sentences. But Jasper, following the answer of Serdar, how important is the sound of food? Such as crunchiness or popping in the sensorial experience of your design?
Well, basically, it is very important just as the food experience itself, because when it crunches, we think as a people, that's fresh food. So, and if you have like a soft texture, I always add the crunchiness or popping sounds to the food experience itself in your mouth. But I'm actually more interested in how you can use sound itself to create a more deeper food experiences. So I can give you like an example. So I'm working on a project now which advocates the use of beans. So I'm doing a big experience for 400 people in New York, and they sit inside an artwork eating a bean dish, eating from a ceramic bean I created with a bean dish inside. But the sound you hear is like the ignition for me to tell a story. So you hear me speaking over a speaker, but the background sounds are created with 400 beans, unique beans that I dropped on top of different instruments in my studio. So I created a soundtrack using those beans. And if you play with those kind of things, I think you immediately get attention from your guests. And as we spoke before, if you time it everything very well, and you have a dish which is tasteful and pleasurable to eat, then you can not only hear the bean, but you can taste the bean, you can see the bean, you can smell the bean, and then everything comes together. And the only thing you have to do as a designer is tell the story in such a way that the one who eats it, who experiences it, goes home with a deep memory for the rest of his life. So that's what sound can do, I think.
Perfect. And now the summary of the argument, the systemic design. Okay, then all these things are impossible without a systemic design. Julie, how do you apply the principle of systemic design in the food product development to create sustainable and circular solution, and in a food supply chain that is the result of the final project and is the delivery of the project?
Yeah, I'm very happy about this question, because I think this is really a very important question, because today we have very complex problems to solve. We are in front of sustainable is complex, is a systemic mess. And so if we want to find a way to interact in this system, we have to have some tools and methods to understand. So when I met the systemic approach, the systemic design methods, it helps me and my students a lot to understand what's going on and to have the big picture and map it, and to have all these levels we talked about before of experience, of culture, of where we come from, and the actors, and then to ask, really take time to ask where we can intervene. What is the level point? The leverage point where we would like to interact, because we can be on the micro level, which is really one happening or one moment or one packaging, one logo. We can be on the meso, so we will maybe meso level would be where I realized we have to change transformation chain in the industry, or on the macro side where we really have to change laws or government input. So we really have to think about if it's on which level we want to be, and if it's right now, this year, in 5 years, or in 10 years. So the systemic approach helps a lot, because we are all in front of this big question of sustainability. And come back to your introduction, design has a responsibility to take. And so for me, first we have to think strategic and then interact. And so everybody takes the place they think it's useful on the level we can measure. But I really try to implement these topics to be as powerful, as impactful as possible. I think DNRs has to take more place, and that others also know that they should get designers on board, even if it's a government project or a big company, and from the beginning on, not at the end.
Thank you so much. Okay, Antonio, if you are in connection. No, it's not in connection. No problem. Antonio is coming. Okay. Thank you so much for the deeply discussion of all the arguments regarding the design for food. Is, in my opinion, is one of the best panel that I ever heard, in my opinion, because all the people engaged in this panel are part of a piece of a design word, and the experience, the sentences, the science, the methodology, and the other, let's say, important things are, let's say, a sort of encyclopedia of the design for food. Take care, not the food design, but the design for food. Then, thank you so much. Thank you to Antonio that we are a little bit in delay. Okay, but it's not a problem. The argument was very important. Okay, and I appreciate, and I'm very happy.
Muy bien. Yo solamente decirlo en español, muchas gracias de nuevo por estar aquí. La variedad de opiniones y de visiones y de enfoques es lo que enriquece el festival, y es lo que espero que otros actores entiendan lo que desde el diseño se puede ofrecer para el cambio del sistema alimentario. Si quieres traducir, Giorgio, bien, y si no, terminamos ya.
No, the richest and the arguments and our part and the let's say the arguments of this panel are the system to change the element or the food system, to propose something of innovation, to propose something of new, and to adapt it to all the people in the world. It's not a literal translation, but it's an interpretation of
Más o menos.
Antonio, es más o menos. Ok, no tenemos problemas.
Nada. Os mando un fuerte abrazo. Cintia, te quiero ver
Thank
por
you so
Madrid.
much. Thank you for having us.
Please,
Serdar, Casper.
next year, live in Madrid.
Sí. O
Definitely.
organizar algo fuera de Madrid.
O fuera de Madrid.
Benelux, Italia, France.
Okay.
¿Ok?
Yeah, we are looking.
London, Cintia,
Yeah, we
Serdar.
about that.
Bueno, os mando un fuerte abrazo.
Okay,
Gracias.
so much. A big
Thank
hug.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting. Thank you. Bye.
Ciao, ciao.